Hello and welcome, fellow awesomeologists, to Awesomeology. I'm Sue.
And I'm Ben, and in this episode, we are welcoming two friends. I should scratch it out and say two family members. They're part of the family, now part of my family, and colleagues to talk about why now is the time for an organization to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So, welcome, Dohnia Dorman and Josh Smith. These are two friends, like I said, family members that I've met through I3 and actually before I3 with Josh at DE. So really excited to have both of you here. And I'll just turn it over to you to introduce yourself, your credit union, and we'll go from there. So Josh, why don't you start?
All right. Thank you, Ben. My name is Josh Smith. I'm responsible for our advocacy work at Schools First Federal Credit Union out in California. So when we say advocacy here, we look at it as really not just advocating for our credit union or the credit union movement, but how do we create advocates amongst our team and members and hopefully elected officials to better understand really what we're advocating for and get them excited about it and have them join us. So, yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Dohnia.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Hi, Sue. Thank you for having me too. I'm Dohnia Dorman. I am a part of the Agile portfolio or project management space at Suncoast Credit Union in Florida. Our area really focuses on working with some internal developers for innovative solutions for either some member-facing apps, so that could be our online and mobile presence, or even our internal employee-facing apps like our CRM. So a lot of innovation and just coming up with some new ideas so that we can best serve internally and externally. So I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I feel like it's a family reunion right now with I3.
Yeah. So speaking of innovation in I3, I'll give just a little bit of background. Our listeners aren't familiar. I3 is the innovation program that comes out of the Filing Research Institute. It's a 2-year program that Josh, Dohnia, and I just wrapped up our actually got some bonus time due to all things COVID, right? A little over 2-year program for us, but super fulfilling and rewarding experience. Got to meet so many great people like Josh and Dohnia, and learned so many great things, including Filene's innovation methodology and some great connections to amazing people around the country. And I just realized, us, Sue and I being in central Wisconsin, it's actually kind of warming up here now, finally coming out of winter, but you guys are bringing the sunshine vibes, California and Florida here. So we're keeping us a little warm today, but so if you haven't heard about the I3 program, we'll share a link to that in the show notes. And they just released the announcement for the new wave of I3 years coming in. So, oh man, I don't know if you guys remember that before we dove in, we were just we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, right? What a cool feeling for them. So, yeah. Well, super happy to have you guys here. Can't say thanks enough for your time, and I really appreciate it. So, Sue, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. So we're going to dwell a little bit still on I3 because the last rotation of I3 was a little bit different, right? And sort of how those projects came to be. And so I'm really interested in your projects, your group projects from the last rotation. And any one of you can answer this to explain sort of the difference between the way your last round of projects broke out as compared to previous projects, and where the inspiration for that came from.
Sure. I'll jump in. I think what was different about this last cycle than our first few cycles were very prescriptive. We got to learn the innovation method that Filene teaches, and that was fantastic and great. And I think it really changed our mindsets on how we approach problems. But it was, I think, a conversation the last time we were able to meet up where essentially we wanted to change the world. This cohort and class of people are super passionate I have varied tenures, within the credit union space. And so because of that, because I think of everything else that was going on in 2020, we realized that we had an opportunity to put our stamp on DEI, and that got expressed differently across our three different teams.
Yeah, it was really kind of just this moment where we all, I think, realized the potential for the first time of what we had learned and what we were capable of as a group, which what made 2020 so hard from a project standpoint, because while we had to work on our projects remotely given our geographic separation, we always did get to come together at the end slash the beginning of our next cycle to really like download what the experience had been and really feed off, as Dohnia said, the diversity of our group, from experience and tenure, and so that was a difficult piece to miss in 2020, because I really feel like that's where the rubber met the road for our group. When we got together, it was just sparks flew.
Mhm.
So for the last cycle, each as I understand it, and please correct me. So the whole group broke down into three groups. One group handled diversity, one equity, one inclusion. So a project around each one of those three sort of core concepts. And I'm really interested to hear about your team's projects, sort of some of the insights that precipitated the project, and just anything that you want to share.
Yeah, I'll kick this one off. So full disclosure, Ben was in my group, so Ben, feel free to jump in and correct me if I miss anything. But our experience was, you know, a lot of I think soul searching and research. So a lot of reflection on what it was we were truly trying to do, and to understand what exists out there. Obviously, there's a lot of great work being done by a lot of great people, and to try to wrap your head around that from an equity standpoint, which was our group's focus. um, there's a lot to download from that. And so, when we started looking into it, we realized, all of this great work was not the same across the board. I mean, there was different focuses, and really what came to the forefront for us was there's no magic bullet for meeting the needs of improving equity, for in specifically in the credit union space, and I think that's true in a general sense as well. Um, so when we really started putting pen to paper, if you will, it was how can we help other like-minded individuals at their organizations really kickstart the equity discussion and lead it down the path that's right for their members and their community. Because what's right, or what might be an opportunity in Southern California, might not be an opportunity, the most important opportunity in Marshfield, Wisconsin. So it's understanding that and trying to just put that research and that soul searching that we all did to paper. So, anything? You say I missed anything, Ben?
I think you did a great job, and I think that one similarity from our last cycle and kind of diving into this specific concept around DEI, was that we had some trouble like finding ourselves, or identifying the thing we wanted to solve, and in every cycle there was always like that pivot point, right, where like either something clicked, or some piece of research that we found or data or whatever like guided us down the path that maybe clarified things for us, coming up to what we wound up presenting or what our final project wound up being. And we at the beginning of this equity project, we stumbled upon the postal banking issue and had the possibility of how the USPS may be providing financial services, which is just an interesting concept to have any awareness about and wrap your head around. But at the end of the day, like it all, spoke to providing access or equitable access to people. And so postal banking may be being a solution for some, but also totally understanding that it wouldn't be the solution for others. And so kind of echoing what Josh said about how we really took this direction of let's just get people started, because we also found, and you both in our group's experience, but also just hearing the challenges that people were having in their own organizations, getting started down the road of equity or DEI as a whole thing, is really, really tough. So like, what could we do to empower anybody in a credit union, whatever level you're at, whatever level of seniority you have, tenure, any of that stuff? Like, what can we do to provide something that gives people that strength to say, hey, this is the thing we need to talk about. This is the thing that we need to see momentum on. And maybe even more importantly, here are some ways that we've done some things and we can celebrate some success here too, because that's the thing that we forget to do in all scopes of our jobs, probably, right? But especially in the realm of like something as monumental as DEI, we need to remember to pause sometimes and remember, hey, this is the thing that we did and it created some change, and that's really important.
I'm sure, and I'm sure that the experience of looking at everything you could possibly do, every piece you could possibly tackle was overwhelming, and that once you start picking apart the different strings that you could possibly pull, you have to give yourself time to celebrate the thing that you did solve, especially knowing there's this whole other, massive things that, this is the next initiative, that's the next thing we have to think about, but let's spend the moment on this one thing that we managed to do.
And, I think it's so rewarding just when we were able to, I mentioned that we were, talking to a lot of folks and doing a lot of research. Just there are some amazing things that are happening in the credit union world, not just in the credit union world, but, in our world in general, and the effort to provide that greater equity. And that's so rewarding to see, like, the impact that's happening. I mean, we had an opportunity to interview the chief operations officer from Point West Credit Union. And I mean, it's amazing just the effort and the focus and how they've really turned them, created a culture that makes their efforts not just, okay, we got to check the box, but it's part of their culture and it's what they do. And that's what they're here for. And it was just, that one stands out in my mind as just an amazing story of inspiration that I think is really needed. That, keep us moving forward.
For sure. Well, Dohnia, do you want to tell us about a little bit about your group's project and some of the insights that you all gathered?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we had the same experience, right? Try not to boil the ocean. We were team diversity. We had different conversations with some DEI legends. One in particular was Maurice Smith, who advocated for the eighth principle, right, of for the cooperative movement, particularly with credit unions. And it really wasn't until our stakeholder conversation with Monica Davey, who was the director of the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion at NCUA, as well as Kathy Mann. She is the CEO and president of Inclusive. So when we had a conversation with them, we really understood a few things, particularly about the NCUA voluntary credit union diversity self-assessment, which is a mouthful. But essentially what we learned was there's a little bit of distrust, or credit unions don't trust giving their DEI data to NCUA. NCUA has not had a lot of responses from credit unions. And more importantly, which I didn't know, the relation to the assessment and the Dodd-Frank Act is that NCUA isn't responsible for being the administrator of this assessment, but they are responsible with reporting the state of diversity for credit unions. And so, having had that conversation, we quickly realized let's focus in our efforts on this self assessment and seeing how we could help NCUA garner more responses. And so, ultimately, that came down to a survey, being able to survey credit unions who have and who haven't submitted the self assessment. And we learned a lot of great lessons. One being that credit unions who have submitted this assessment said keep it with NCUA. They've seen positive improvement with their DEI transformation. They actually are quite further along in their transformation than credit unions who haven't submitted the assessment. But what was funny was those who haven't submitted it, they still look at the assessment. About 4 in 10 review it internally, they have conversations, but they don't hit submit. So we were really curious why that was the case. And again, it boiled down to some trust issues, also not knowing how their responses would be used, thinking that they would be penalized, with future findings or exams. Also, just not having the capacity as an organization to have a resource complete the assessment. So, between that and a few other learnings, the assessment definitely looks like it has some intrinsic value. And so we were able to come up with a punch list, if you will, of some quick wins, incremental improvements that NCUA could take that would allow them to see more responses. And some included, just leading with the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion rather than NCUA to maybe associate the self-assessment with that office because they really want to be that value add partner when it comes to a credit union's DEI transformation. A peer scorecard because credit unions are competitive and they were more likely to complete the assessment if they knew where their peers ranked. So we gave them a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, they were pretty receptive. So we're hopeful that we can see some progress being made because ultimately we're all committed to being able to truly paint the picture of what DEI looks like for our credit unions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did your group find, Dohnia, that any of the reporting from credit unions centered around this idea that they were reticent to report things because it's sort of a painful self-assessment that if you feel you're not doing enough, then, and you don't have to admit that you're not doing enough, that maybe it's just easier if you don't. Is that
Absolutely? Yes, we definitely heard that from the responses that some didn't feel like they were ready, that they've done enough, so they would just wait. But the value is just submit because it's more of getting the pulse for themselves than anything. So there's no penalty for it, and there's no expectation that you have to be at this metric. It's all about sort of best practices and these collective findings. So yeah, between that and some credit unions felt it wasn't a safety and soundness issue, DEI, or they weren't sure what the ROI would be. So some of it is a little bit of changing mindsets in terms of what DEI the responsibility of DEI in the credit union space. But for others, when it came down to just the assessment, there was some hesitancy, just maybe soon, but just not yet.
Yeah. I think that just hearing both of you describe the projects, one of the coolest things about I3 for me was seeing kind of the different scope of change, innovation, whatever that was being presented and proposed. I mean, something as simple as team equity, kind of fostering this environment of like, hey, just get started. Here's the tools and resources to do that. To your team, Dohnia, like giving feedback to the NCUA, like how cool is that? In just such a grand scale of different final projects or whatever. So and we saw that in every cycle, how the diversity in solutions or problems that were being presented. One of the coolest things about I3, I think. Dohnia, you mentioned ROI a bit, so I'm gonna take that as a cue to segue and move into the next question, which is, why should businesses be examining their understanding and initiatives around DEI? And sub question to that, what info can we use to measure progress performance, et cetera, relating to DEI. That's the ROI part, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll give my opinion. And I think what we found from our research, and there's a lot of research out there, that DEI really impacts business or an organization's business outcomes. And so, with credit unions, we often look at loan growth or asset growth, all of these financial key performance indicators, as we should as a financial cooperative. But if you take a DEI focus, I think that could be a conduit to achieving even greater growth and progress for your organization. And so, credit unions were really great at trying to be inclusive, and credit unions should be reflective of their communities. So their members should mirror their communities, their staff should mirror their communities. And when you don't, from a financial perspective, you're literally leaving money on the table. But since we're more about the people side than the finance side at times, right? People helping people, we're by not being inclusive and thinking about all of the unique needs that a community may have or your staff may have, then we're really leaving people outside, just outside of the doors of what a credit union can offer, and are leaving them to other alternative, um, you know, like check cashing organizations and all these other services that credit unions can serve and do better. So DEI has to be considered, right? If you want to see some greater business outcomes, and if you really want to level up the concept of people helping people, because then you're able to see and assess, well, which people and um, who and all people and how. And so I think it's just another lens to look through as you develop those KPIs.
From a big picture sense, and from my world of the advocacy side, I think it's more important than ever for us, for the viability of our movement, to embrace it. I mean, it's in our DNA. It's what we were, I think Dohnia put it great. If we're not embracing it, we're leaving people outside. Credit unions were created to bring people in the financial, provide them those financial services they were being denied. And, just perfect timing, this is GAC week, and we're up there advocating for our movement, trying to help elected officials and our regulators see that we're making that difference we talk about, and that we reflect on as part of our history, that we're making that difference a reality today. And that's so important, because if we don't embrace that difference and we don't make it a reality, then really what are we advocating for? And so from a ROI, I would say that it's something that needs to be embraced if we're planning on being here, for future generations that will need us. And we need to continue evolving in how we deliver on that promise.
So let me play devil's advocate just for a minute. Okay. So you have me convinced. I'm in your C-suite, and you guys have me convinced that there is ROI, that there's a good reason to do this. So I have decided that we need to address it in our hiring. We need to address it in our service practices. And then we have checked the two most important boxes and we are done. What would you say to me?
I would say that you're not done. Think again. Because, and that was one thing that we talked about with our project, right? Is our fear is that credit unions would approach DEI with a check the box mentality. Right. And we want to go from this transactional mentality to a transformational mentality, where it's this continuous road to getting better, doing things differently. And really, I think it starts with the end in mind. So a credit union needs to envision, what does a more inclusive, equitable, diverse, fair, just credit union look like? And now what do we look like today? And wherever those gaps are, just identify them and take them incrementally, break it down. And, at that point, sure, if you want to check off milestones, that's great. But you're not checking off the box that you've done enough, because as soon as you've done enough, you just hit the minimum. And I don't think credit unions want to settle for the minimum.
I would add to that, it needs to be part of the culture. It's not, I, I hate to sound like, a fanatic when it comes to credit unions, but it is what it is.
We love fanatics, Josh. It's okay.
Our historical promise as credit unions is directly aligned with that effort to bring DEI to our members and to our teams. And when you embrace that credit union culture, I've seen it, and we've heard it from others, that it does foster this ongoing desire to be better and replace what's great with with something better. And to steal a phrase, and I think that cultural mind shift has to happen for it to be an ongoing effort to avoid that, checking the box mentality.
Yeah. There's the ROI thing, right? Like the dollars and cents, the money and business side of it, which is important. We're a financial institution. We need to do things like that to stay operational. One thing that we haven't solved yet, and if we had, this would maybe be ingrained in every credit union's culture without question, but is and I don't know, I'm totally winging it here, but like a return on like the emotional investment. I think that's kind of like what you're talking about, Josh, where, yeah, we can dedicate resources and people time and all of this stuff to DEI, and maybe we can prove that we've opened ourselves to this new group of people that we weren't properly servicing or providing access to before. And here's how, the balance sheet looks different because of that. That's great. But also I don't know if it's a byproduct or a direct result of those same efforts, is this hunger, this cultural shift that happens inside people, inside organizations, where you guys are saying what I'm saying what you guys are saying, where you are constantly hungry to do more, to do better, to be better, to learn more. If there's anything that I've learned through, the last 6-8 months, however long it's been since DEI has really been a significant part of our conversations, it's just been that we have so much to learn, and that can feel overwhelming, but it's also so fulfilling when you do learn, especially when you take a second to step back and look at how far you've come as a person, or maybe how far you've come as an organization. And you can't quantify that with dollars and cents all the time, but it's there and it's real value, and it'll change yourself and your organization, your credit union, for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be hard pressed to find a credit union or an organization that has had a focus on DEI, has been intentional with their transformational change and said, yeah, that was a waste of time. I'm pretty doubtful, that that's the case. So it does require some humility and vulnerability, right? Some crucial conversations that probably are uncomfortable, but as long as that culture and that commitment to the culture is there, then I think credit unions can make great strides.
And you mentioned the return on emotional investment. I think that's that was a great way to put it. And we rightfully so, we primarily focus on the membership, right? Our members, are we returning that emotional investment, helping them understand why did the greater question of why are they with a credit union? But we also have to think about our teams. And one of the I remember a lot of talk about the war for talent. Filene had done a lot of research on that, and how important that is and how that's critical to our success as well. This is a great way for us to engage our team. It's shown that, increased social responsibility, for lack of a better term or a very broad term, is something that, people want to be a part of. and help strive to make achievements in that area. That's a great way for us to connect talent with being part of the credit union movement and helping push that forward. And showing again, why we're different and how you can be a part of that and the actual good you can do with your day to day. I mean, we're all excited about it, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I had no idea what I was getting into when I started, working for a credit union. But I've been here for over 15 years, and I can't imagine doing anything else because it feeds not only the professional challenge, but I mean, it feeds the soul too,
Yeah, definitely being purpose-minded. It just makes sense to work for a credit union, to be a part of a credit union, to be an advocate, a champion of credit unions. And like you touched on, Josh, a lot of consumers these days are socially minded. And so they will probably gravitate towards organizations that show they also are committed to being socially minded and doing the right thing. And organizations and credit unions who fall short of that will likely see their growth or lack thereof, those key performance indicators drop. So I'm sure they would be able to associate that back to, well, what was their strategy around DEI?
Is there a risk that a business has missed the boat, let's say, on DEI and starting an initiative, and how could that create negative PR? What would you say to a credit union that maybe has not started it, or is thinking about it and just hasn't for some reason, or maybe hasn't even thought about it?
I would say jump in. I think it's never too late to get in the game. And just because they may not have said anything, maybe on social media or taken active steps and been very vocal with what their DEI strategy is or could be in the last year or so, doesn't mean that they're behind or that they just need to cancel and call out of the game, because the game isn't going anywhere. And I don't really want to liken DEI to a game, but for this analogy, they just need to jump in and start small, knowing that everyone is on their own journey. And as long as they're seeking progress and not perfection, they really can't fail.
Dohnia, you said everyone's on their own journey, and it's absolutely true. And that's kind of what we reflected on when in our project. But going specific to credit unions, I mean, we're built on a cooperative nature, and I think that that gives us a competitive advantage when it comes to implementing and learning. Learning and implementing, I guess, would be in that order, from each other. And we all had the chance to talk with leaders within our movement that have embraced that, and the willingness to just share insights and knowledge. I mean, that's a great opportunity. So, I think that there's a value to saying, you know what, we haven't launched our own, but by at least asking questions and learning from our colleagues that have, I think there's a real value to that. And it's, again, inherent in what we do as credit unions. So
I agree with you, Josh, because words are powerful and messages are powerful. And I think consumers, our members, and our employees, they're looking to leadership to say something and to say, we're looking into it. It's on our roadmap. We're in the process, whatever the case may be. Sometimes you have to express your intention at some point, because, like I said, members, employees, they're eager to know.
Yeah.
And Dohnia, you have led me directly into our next question. So thank you for that very smooth transition.
Anytime.
Well done.
You are officially a plant in this conversation. As long as you indulged me playing devil's advocate again, let me put on that C-suite hat again. And last year into the summer after George Floyd was murdered, we saw a lot of really great examples of even large multinational companies stepping forward, having statements, and really making DEI a big part of the conversation. And I think that put a lot of smaller organizations in a place to make a decision. If we are we Coca-Cola, or are we, the tiny little mom and pop shop, and how do we step into that space? So let's say I'm back in the C-suite and I say to you, nobody's asking us to take that stance. Why should we do it? Why should we be vocal about our stance on DEI? What would you say to me? Stop it, right, Don? You have to say, stop arguing.
Honestly, I would say just because people don't ask you to do the right thing doesn't mean you should not do the right thing. Right. And to quote a good friend or family member of ours, he said, people will forgive a bad decision. They won't forget indecision. And that fine person was Ben Bauer, who shared that recently with us. And so, yeah, we might have to cut this and edit this because I lost.
That was a virtual mic drop.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, boom.
I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
You were in the zone. Yeah.
Ben is that inspiring that after I quote him, there's nothing more I really can say. Josh, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So, any final thoughts on, thinking of our audience of credit union people, business people? Any final thoughts to leave with our audience on, anything they should be thinking of if they're considering leading a DEI charge in their own organization?
I would just say there's a lot of information out there and it can be very overwhelming. And as someone, just speaking for me personally, who has really tried to focus on listening and learning over this period of time, the journey is so important. You can't let yourself feel that you'll never understand. Well, let me back that up. This might need to be cut, but
Did we say we were cutting things? We're not cutting it.
Okay. All right. Well, good to know. Good to know.
All fine.
All right. I would just say there's a lot out there and it can be overwhelming, but to focus on the learning and the listening, the results will come from that. If you're purposeful in those actions, again, just there is so much good information out there, and things will open your eyes, and then at that point, the innovations and the actions will bubble to the surface.
Nice.
I would add to that. Again, think about the end goal that you're trying to achieve, what that vision looks like compared to your current state, and identify those gaps and take it step by step, knowing that there isn't an exact science. This is an art, and not to compare your credit union to another credit union because there are a lot of different dynamics at play. So really be intentional, be reasonable, give yourself some grace and some space, because it's okay to fail as long as it's not catastrophic. That's what our CEO says all the time. But know that from maybe those failures or even wins, there's always a learning that can happen. So as long as you take the learning, apply the learning, and again, seek progress over perfection, then it can be achievable. And like Josh alluded to, rewarding as well. So we encourage you guys to take the jump, take the leap, and see where it goes.
Excellent advice. Love it.
Oh, boy.
So as this brings us at the conclusion of that wonderful conversation to our something awesome segment. And in our something awesome segment, or awesome segment, we like to offer some recommendations. Nothing terrifically formal. Always great if it relates to the topic, but also anything that sort of lights your fire. Our whole overarching theme of our Awesomeology podcast is informing what you're doing, making other people's lives better by the things that inspire you. So I hear a little birdie told me, actually, that big fat birdie that was outside my window earlier told me, Ben, that you had something awesome to share.
I do have something awesome to share, and I would normally love to take this opportunity to talk about something just outside of what we do, credit unions, work, marketing, all that good stuff. But it just fits so well with GAC week and this topic, this conversation we just had about DEI, and just something awesome I want to share is just a little bit of info on Samira Salem, who is the VP of DEI for CUNA, who we were able to interview as part of our project, which was just another one of those awesome conversations and big bright minds that we got to meet as part of the I3 process. So little plug for her. She has a session at GAC. If that's on your calendar, check out her session, and we'll share that in the show notes as well. Maybe you can catch a recording of it or something. But she's just been a great source of inspiration for me on maybe some ways to pause and reflect on some great things that have happened, some awesome things that have happened. And recently she mentioned things like the network of Latino CU professionals, CU Pride, CU Women's Leadership Alliance, the partnership that CUNA and the AACUC are growing, working together on a scholarship program. And then that's like before any great examples of stuff that leagues are doing. And this is all just so like recent and big, cool stuff that's happening in the last year, maybe less, right? So like right now, let's just take this tiny second to just pause and like think of all of those groups and what's happening, the conversation, the change that's happening in organizations, because of George Floyd, because of our ability to talk about George Floyd, our ability to have these conversations that are, as Dohnia mentioned before, maybe can be uncomfortable, as we're all learning and stuff. So, I think there's just so many great examples. I mean, this conversation that we just had, like, I remember when we were talking about, what do we need to do in the realm of DEI, back in May, a real thought I had was like, okay, how do we do something or talk about something that this isn't going to just be that moment in time where, okay, a couple months goes by and now we're not talking DEI stuff anymore. So like, I mean, it's March of 21, y'all, and like, we're still talking about this stuff. So now, of course, talk needs to turn into action and, all of that, for sure. And we're getting there, right? And I feel like I can say that like with real belief behind it. Like, there are people, there are organizations that are really, really making like visible and tangible and maybe even like financial impact on change. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's so awesome. So that was maybe a little extra awesome that I didn't mean to go into, but the specific something awesome is Samira Salem. Google her name, VP of DEI at CUNA. She's, I'm sure there's plenty of footage of her being interviewed out there, talking about the great work that she's doing through CUNA. And I think that's all just great stuff to pause and celebrate.
Excellent. Josh or Dohnia, anything you want to share with the audience?
I'll jump in. Yeah, since it is in honor of GAC week, I had the privilege of attending the virtual African American Credit Union Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which is typically a part of GAC. I'm a member of the AACUC, the African American Credit Union Coalition, and so I was able to help volunteer and organize that this year. And since I've never attended GAC, it was a really phenomenal experience. And just to hear, there were 5 inductees last night. And just to hear their stories, hear what they've accomplished, and know how they led with courage and conviction. It was just super inspiring. And it really led me down this rabbit hole of, you know, I'm sure when they did these things throughout their career, they weren't doing it to be a part of a Hall of Fame. I don't even know if the Hall of Fame was even established when some of them were in the prime of their careers. But, you know, it got me thinking your legacy is tied to the impact that you've made, and your impact is tied to the decisions that you made. And those decisions are tied to your beliefs and your purpose and your passion. So it just sort of underscores when you're living in like your purpose and your passion, I think that's like the ultimate sweet spot. Then there are some amazing things that can come from it, or for the theme of this show, some awesome things that could come from it. So I'm hopeful that any listener is really they're aware of what their passions are and able to fill out their purpose, and just know that awesome things are ahead of you.
Very nice. Josh, what about you?
So to kind of piggyback off the awesome things are ahead, I think that, the last year has, for us all, we've been talking professionally, but personally, there's been lots of challenges, right? With just the environment we're living in. And, it's, I have been able to start, seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. That, as the pandemic and vaccines are rolling out, and, things are getting better, and that's awesome. I was just going to share, that, my son, he plays ice hockey, and the rinks have been closed for over a year now, and they finally are starting to allow them to come back out. So I got to spend Sunday watching my son get back on the ice, and it reminded me of, we've had so much time on our hands, during this pandemic, and like from a personal standpoint, and a lot of us, wondering what the heck we're doing with those hours. It's good to be back and creating those, being able to just have that sense of normalcy and embrace how awesome normal can be in terms of our personal lives. And then I was also going to give one other thing for anyone that's really struggling out there, and I've been barking at Ben about this. You got to watch Ted Lasso on Apple Plus. I have to give it. I mean, it was one of those things that, I don't know. I didn't realize I needed it until I saw it. So, I'll leave it at that, but highly recommended.
Very good.
And
We'll have to check that out.
Vegas just won a Golden Globe, right? So now it's like Josh has been hounding me, but now I have like the Academy or whoever picks those awards. Like,
yeah,
it's legit. Like, you got to watch.
Yeah, if the Hollywood Foreign Press, is what it took to get Ben to actually say, you know what, I'll give this show a shot. But
and what he doesn't know is actually Josh recommended it to the Hollywood Foreign Press. He mentioned it to them, and they said, yes, let's give it a Golden Globe. So,
hey, advocacy, in all aspects of life, right? So, yeah.
Very good. Great recommendation. So we have a whole bunch of links that we can share below, a number of things that people can check out and some different resources. This is your regular reminder that you can find us on your favorite podcast app, or you can always visit our blog at exclamationqso.com/blog and hear all of our episodes.
Awesome. Just a last huge thank you to Dohnia and Josh for joining us. Awesome conversation. Great seeing you. Great hearing you. Really appreciate your time. This is Sue and Ben, your self-proclaimed professors of awesomeology, reminding you that life's awesome if you make it awesome. We'll see you next time.